Aí, garoto. Bom, galera, acho que agora foi, hein? Agora foi, hein? Deu um bug nesse negócio aqui, galera. Calma aí. Pelo amor de Deus. Ver aqui como é que tá a questão aqui. Fala, meu querido. Estão me ouvindo aí, gente?
Fala, meu querido, estão me ouvindo aí, gente?
E aí, Max? Vendo aqui o que a Sony vai revelar aqui, né? Esperando. Vocês estão vendo aí a página do PlayStation Blog, então, né? Beleza, estão vendo a página aí? Porque essa configuração aqui do OBS tem hora que dá uma bugada. Deixa eu ver aqui. Vou colocar agora. Fala, Miguel, beleza? Tomara, né, velho? É 1 hora agora, vai começar a transmissão ao vivo aqui. Página branca? Não, vocês não estão vendo a página do PlayStation Blog com as coisas aí, não? É porque eu tô vendo, tô perguntando vocês aqui. Eu quero colocar minha webcam aqui, mas o trem deu uma bugada aqui, velho. Se OBS aqui, ele funciona só na hora que ele quer. Impressionante. Pareceu minha carinha, não, né? É um saco, viu? Vou te contar. Era pra eu ter entrado meio de meia, mas tá dando um. Tô até com medo de eu mexer nesse trem e desconfigurar tudo aqui, porque. Não, vocês estão vendo aí T-Show 20, PlayStation Blog, vocês não estão vendo aí não? Porque eu tô acompanhando pelo celular e tá certo aqui, ó. Entendeu? Tá aparecendo, né? É por esse site aqui, não é? Ô, acredito que não apareceu minha cam tá aqui, mas não quer aparecer pra vocês, né? Acho que eu vou deixar sem mesmo, é bom que vocês acompanhem certinho aí, né? Meu rosto não tampa. Uai, ô Maxley, o pessoal tá vendo o blog aqui, Maxley. E aí, como é que tá aí no Pará, tudo certo? Tô usando um headset aqui, galera, que é pro PC,
Tô
acho que tá
usando um
boa.
headset aqui, galera,
Tá
que
bom o
é
áudio aí,
pro
né?
PC. Acho que tá bom. Headset aqui, galera. Tá bom o áudio aí, né?
Tá indo pro hospital, Valdomiro? É no YouTube, é? Deixa eu ver aqui. É no YouTube? Calma aí. Qual o site do YouTube? PlayStation. Não falar que é no PlayStation Blog, aí. Por que que eu olhei mais cedo e não vi isso aqui? Ah, aqui, ó. Achei. Achei aqui, ó, galera. Mete da empresa. Aí mesmo, negócio de férias, você falou, né? Aqui, ó. Pronto, estamos aqui. Mas tá certo, Max. Olha lá de novo. Tá agora no canal do YouTube aqui, ó. Tô esperando só o tanto de conversa aqui, o pessoal. 271.710 pessoas em espera, hein? Bora lá, vamos ver o monstro saindo da jaula, hein? É, tomara, né? Justo hoje, hein, ô Valdomiro? Te pede pra ir ao médico lá da empresa, velho. Pai, hein? Ô, Max, mudou a tela pra você, é porque eu tinha passado por aquela tela, eu entrei depois no YouTube, entendeu? Adivinha, amor? Onde meu pai tá? Tá no Rio de Janeiro. A missão deve ser. Será que eles não estão sabendo do coronavírus, não? É, e o lugar das tretas, né? O Rio de Janeiro. É, eu console eu acho que é demais, mas se dá as especificações e o controle já tô satisfeito, galera. Já tô dado satisfeito. Se passar o console, melhor ainda, porque a Xbox já revelou logo no ano passado, né? O início do ano, quer dizer, né? Foi em janeiro, o console lá, aquele frigobar lá, o Xbox Series X. Series X. Cara, eu falar a verdade pra você, eu não achei feio assim, não. Não, não vai ser igual o Dev Kit, não. Nunca é igual o Dev Kit. Nunca é. Deixa eu tirar umas coisinhas aqui que estão abertas, galera, para poder deixar o negócio bem mais fluido a minha live aqui. Ah, é, foi na live do GOT, né? Verdade. Olha o tanto de gente aqui, gente. Ué, por que que eu não tô conseguindo colocar a tela inteira nesse negócio? Ah, é, porque ainda não entrou, né? É por isso. Ué, 1 hora já, cadê? Deixa eu recarregar a página aqui, pera aí, gente. Aí, garoto. Será, né? Ô, Maxei, eles só vão lançar talvez o. Deixa eu baixar aqui. Talvez vão lançar só. Vou baixar o som aqui, pera aí, gente. Deixa eu fazer o seguinte, vou baixar aqui. Melhorou? Melhorou? Melhorou aí, gente? Som? Vou desligar aqui. Desativar o som. Beleza. Desculpa aí, Valdomiro. Fui pego de surpresa, eu carreguei aqui, a página mudou, né? Deixa eu ver o que o pessoal tá falando aqui. Nanã. Gente de vários países, claro, né? 428.768 pessoas aqui na live do PlayStation. Opa, vamos lá. Bora, 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 bora. Ô, Maxley, depois eu respondo aí. Vai lançar talvez por 1 ou 2 anos ainda jogos cross-gen. PlayStation 5 e PlayStation 4. Vamos comparar aqui, ó.
To bring that to
Vamos
you
lá.
than the one and only Mark Cerny. Without further ado,
Legendas em
over to you,
inglês
Mark.
aqui. Vamos lá.
Thank you, Jim. There will be lots of chances later on this year to look at the PlayStation 5 games. Today, I want to talk a bit about our goals for the PlayStation 5 hardware and how they influenced
Como é
the
que tá aí o
development
áudio
of the
aí
console.
da
I
apresentação?
think you all know I'm a big believer in console generations. Once every 5 or 6 or 7 years, a console arrives with substantially new capabilities. There's a lot of learning by the game developers, hopefully not too overwhelming, and soon there's games that could never have been created before. Now, it used to be that as a console designer, you'd somehow intuit what would be the best set of capabilities for the new console, and then build it in complete secrecy. For the PlayStation consoles, that period lasted through PlayStation 3, a powerful and groundbreaking console, but also one that caused quite a lot of heartache, as it was initially difficult to develop games for. So, starting with PlayStation 4, we've taken a different approach, roughly centered around 3 principles. The first of these is listening to the developers, which is to say that a lot of what we put into a console derives directly from the needs and aspirations of the game creators. We definitely do have some ideas of our own, but at the core of our philosophy for designing consoles is that game players are here for the fantastic games, which is to say that game creators matter. Anything we can do to make life easier for the game creators or help them realize their dreams, we will do. So, about once every 2 years, I take a tour of the industry. I go to the various developers and publishers, sit down, and discuss how they're doing with the current consoles and what they'd like to see in future consoles. This requires weeks on the road, as reaching the bulk of the game creators involves talking to well over 100 people at something like 24 publishers and developers. And it is incredibly valuable. By the way, the feature most requested by the developers, that was an SSD, which we were very happy to put in the hardware, but a lot of problem solving was required. I'll be doing a deep dive on the SSD and surrounding systems later on in this talk. It's also key to make a generational leap while keeping the console sufficiently familiar to game developers. I think about this in terms of balancing evolution and revolution. Now, with PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, the target was a revolution each time with a brand new feature set. That was great in many ways, but time for the developers to get up and running got longer with each console. In the past, I've called this time to triangle. Here's what I had for those 3 consoles. To be clear, I'm not talking about time to make a game. Developers will be ambitious, and it may take them 6 years or so to realize their vision. What I'm talking about is that dead time before graphics and other aspects of game development are up and running, and trying to minimize that. On the other hand, if we're trying to reduce that dead time to 0, that means the hardware architecture can't change at all. We're handcuffed. We need to judge for each feature what value it adds and whether it's worth the increase in developer time needed to support it. So with PlayStation 4, we were able to strike a pretty good balance between performance and familiarity. We got required learning back to PlayStation 1 levels. With PS5, the GPU was definitely the area we felt the most tension between adding new features and keeping a familiar programming model. Ultimately, I think we've ended up with something under a month of getting up to speed. That feels like we're striking about the right balance. I'll go into a bit more detail later today about our philosophy with the GPU and the specific feature set that resulted from it. It's also very important for us, as the hardware team, to find new dreams, by which I mean something other than CPU performance, GPU performance, and the amount of RAM. The increase in graphics performance over the past 2 decades has been astonishing, but there are other areas in which we can innovate and provide significant value to the game creators, and through them, the players. That's why the SSD was very much on our list of directions to explore, regardless of what came out of the conversations with game developers and publishers. The biggest feature in this category is the custom engine for audio. That's today's final
Calma,
topic.
mano.
The
Começou
push for
agora.
vastly improved
E aquela
audio.
logo
And
ali,
in particular, 3D
púlpito
audio
ali
isn't something that came
do
out of the developer
PlayStation
meetings.
geral.
It's much more the
Calma aí,
case that
vai
we
embora
had
e
a
vai
dream
mostrar
of
uma
what
coisa.
might be possible 5 years from now, and then worked out a number of steps we could take to set us on that path. So here again are the 3 principles, the first being enabling the desires of developers to drive the hardware design. To me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation. It's a game changer. And it was the #1 ask from developers for PlayStation 5. As in, we know it's probably impossible, but can you put an SSD in it? That was a discussion we were also having internally. It was clear that the presence of a hard drive in every PlayStation 4 was having a positive impact. A lot of things that would simply have been impossible at Blu-ray disc speeds were now possible. At the same time, though, in 2015 and 2016, when we were having these conversations, developers were already banging up against the limits of the hard drive. And a lot of developer time was being spent designing around slow load speeds. I want to focus in on just one number here, which is how long it takes to load a gigabyte of data from a hard drive. The difficulty being that hard drives are neither particularly fast nor flexible. If all your data is in one block, which is frankly not very likely, you can load 50 to 100 megabytes a second, depending on where the data is located on the hard drive. Let's assume it's on the outer edge, which means loading a gigabyte takes 10 seconds. If you compress your game packages, you can fit more data on the Blu-ray disc and also effectively boost your hard drive read speed by the compression ratio. We support zlib decompression on PlayStation 4 that gets you something like 50% more data on the disk and 50% higher effective read speed. Unfortunately, though, it's highly likely that your data is scattered around in various files on the hard drive, as well as sourced from multiple locations within those files. So lots of seeks are needed at 2 to 50-ish milliseconds each. My rule of thumb is that the hard drive is spending 2/3 of its time seeking, and only 1/3 of its time actually loading data. Putting all of that together, a gigabyte is very roughly 20 seconds to load from a hard drive. Now, a gigabyte is not much data. Games are using 5 or 6 gigabytes of RAM on PlayStation 4, so boot times and load times can get pretty grim. Or to put that differently, as a player, you wait for the game to boot, wait for the game to load, wait for the level to reload every time you die, and you wait for what is euphemistically called fast travel. And all of that leads to the dream. What if we could have not just an SSD, but a blindingly fast SSD? If we could load 5 gigabytes a second from it, what would change? Now, SSDs are completely different from hard drives. They don't have seeks as such. If you have a 5 gigabyte a second SSD, you can read data from 1,000 different locations in that second, pretty much at speed. As for time to load a gigabyte, this is next gen we're talking about, so memory is bigger. Instead, we should be asking how long to load 2 gigabytes. And the answer is about 1/4 of a second. I mean, that's amazing. We're talking 2 orders of magnitude, meaning very roughly 100 times faster. Which means at 5 gigabytes a second for the SSD, the potential is that the game boots in a second. There are no load screens. The game just fades down while loading a half dozen gigabytes and fades back up again. Same for a reload. You're immediately back in the action after you die. And fast travel becomes so fast it's blink and you miss it. As game creators, we go from trying to distract the player from how long fast travel is taking, like those Spider-Man subway rides, to being so blindingly fast that we might even have to slow that transition down. Pretty cool, right? But for me, this is not the primary reason to change from a hard drive to an SSD. The primary reason for an ultra-fast SSD is that it gives the game designer freedom. Or to put that differently, with a hard drive, the 20 seconds that it takes to load a gigabyte can sabotage the game that the developer is trying to create. I think almost all of us in the room have experienced this, maybe in different ways. Say we're making an adventure game and we have 2 rich environments where we each want enough textures and models to fill memory. Which you can do as long as you have a long staircase or elevator ride or a windy corridor where you can ditch the old assets and then take 30 seconds or so to load the new assets. Having a 30-second elevator ride is a
melhorar
little
muito,
extreme.
melhorar meu inglês
More
mesmo,
realistically, we'd probably chop the
Essas
world
horas, assim,
into a
traduzir
number of smaller pieces and then do some
certinho,
calculations with
instantaneamente pra
sight
você, né?
lines and run
Inglês é
speeds
muito bom,
like
não.
we did for Haven City when we were making Jack 2. The game is 20 years old, but not much has changed since then. All
Fica
those
sem
twisted
bateria.
passages are there for a reason. There's a whole subset of level design dedicated to
Estão
this sort
falando
of
da
work,
arquitetura
but
interna,
still,
né,
it's a
do,
giant distraction for a team that just wants to
das
make their
tecnologias que
game.
irão embarcar no PlayStation
So
5.
when I talked about
No
the
PlayStation
dream
5.
of an SSD, part of the reason for that 5 gigabyte a second target was to eliminate loads, but also part of the reason for that target was streaming. As in, what if the SSD is so fast that as the player is turning around, it's possible to load textures for everything behind the player in that split second? If you figure that it takes half a second to turn, that's 4 gigabytes of compressed data you can load. That sounds about right
4
for next gen.
gigabytes
Anyway, back to the
comprimidos,
hard
não sei o que
drive.
lá.
Another strategy for increasing effective read speed is to make big sequential chunks of data. For example,
Muito
we might
técnico aqui,
group
cara.
all the data together for each city block.
Muito técnico.
That removes most of the seeks, and the streaming gets faster. But there's a downside too, which is that frequently used data is included in many chunks and therefore is on the hard drive many, many times. Marvel's Spider-Man uses this strategy, and though it works very well for increasing the streaming speed, there's a massive duplication
né?
as a result.
Spider-Man,
Some of the objects like
Como vai ser
mailboxes or
trabalhado,
news
por
racks
exemplo,
are on the hard
nesse
drive
jogo, né?
400 times. What I'm describing here are things
É,
that
mais ou
cramp
menos isso
a
aí,
creative
Miguel, isso
director's
mesmo.
style. Either level design gets a little bit
Muito
boring in
técnico que ele tá
places,
falando aqui
or
também, cara.
the data is
Se mesmo
duplicated
fosse
so
em
many
português,
times
dá
that
pra
it
gente
no
entender
longer
direito,
fits on
não.
the Blu-ray disc. And you end up with hard limits on the player's run speed or driving speed. The player can't go faster than the load speed from the hard drive. And finally, I'm sure many of you have noticed that after a patch download, a PlayStation 4 will sometimes take a long time to install the patch. That's because when just part of a file has been changed, the new data can be
Arquivo
downloaded
original
pretty
é
quickly. But before the
porções
game boots up,
moldadas,
a brand
são
new file has
colocadas
to be
no
constructed
novo,
that
novo
includes the changed
arquivo.
portion. Otherwise, every change would add a seek or two. Even so, you can occasionally see this happening on game titles. They start to hitch once they get patched enough. With an SSD, though, no seeks, so no need to make brand new files with the changes incorporated into them, which means no installs as you know them today. There's yet one more benefit, which is that system memory can be used much more efficiently. On PlayStation 4, game data on the hard drive feels very distant and difficult to use.
tá vendo?
By the time you realize you need a piece of data, it's much too late to go out and load it. So system memory has to contain all of the
Tem
data
dados
that can
para
be
os próximos
used in the
30
next
segundos de
30
gameplay,
seconds or so of
pouco,
gameplay.
de
That means a lot of the
de
8 gigabytes of system memory
inativas,
is
né?
idle. It's just waiting there to be
Lá
potentially
direita ali,
used.
distância, dificuldade para
On
usar,
PlayStation
package.
5, though, the SSD
A
is very
next gen, tá
close to
vendo?
being like
Tá
more
falando da
RAM.
geração
Typically, it's fast
anterior,
enough that when you
a nova
realize you
geração aí,
need
ó.
a piece of data, you
Olha
can
a
just
diferença,
load
galera.
it from the SSD and use it. There's no need to have lots of data
Nossa,
parked
cara,
in system memory
de
waiting to
gameplay,
potentially
mais
be
RAM,
used. A different way of saying
usativo.
that is that
Que
most of
diferença, hein, cara?
RAM is working on the game's behalf. This is
Não,
one
isso
of the
aí
reasons
era
that
do,
16
do
gigabytes
4.
of GDDR6
Agora que é
feels
do 5,
right for
16
PlayStation
GB.
5. The presence of the SSD
Paradigmas da nova
reduces the
geração,
need
aí,
for
ó,
a
de
massive
16 GB,
intergenerational
mais
increase in
GDDR6.
size. So,
Esse é do
back to the
PlayStation 5.
dream of the SSD.
Entendeu?
Here's the set of targets. Boot the game in a
ali, ó,
second.
lado superior
No
esquerdo,
load
o
screens.
sonho do SSD.
Design freedom, meaning no twisty passages or long corridors.
Sem
More game on the disk
tela
and more
de
game on the
loading,
SSD.
né?
And finally,
Streaming
those patch installs
em
go
alta,
away.
altíssima velocidade.
The reality, though, is that the SSD is just one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of places where bottlenecks can occur in between the SSD and the game code that uses the data. You can see this on PlayStation 4. If I use an
Justamente,
SSD
mano.
with 10 times the speed of a standard hard drive, I probably see only double the loading speed.
Duas
if
vezes mais
that.
rápido ali, ó.
For PlayStation 5, our goal was not just that the SSD itself be 100 times faster. It was that game loads and streaming would be 100 times faster. So every single potential bottleneck needed to be addressed. And there are a
100
lot
vezes
of
mais
them.
rápido, que isso, hein?
Let's look at check-in and what happens when its overhead
dobro,
gets
né? 100
100
vezes.
times
É isso
larger.
mesmo.
Conceptually, check-in is a pretty simple process. Data is loaded into
100%
system
mais
memory
rápido.
from the hard drive or SSD. It's examined, a few values are tweaked to check it in, and then it's moved to its final location. At the SSD speeds we're talking about, that last part, moving the data, meaning copying it from one location to another, takes roughly an entire next-gen CPU core. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If all the overheads get 100 times larger, that will cripple the frame rate as soon as the player moves, and that massive stream of data starts coming off the SSD. So to solve all of that, we built a lot of custom hardware, namely a custom flash controller and a number of custom units in our main chip. The flash controller in the SSD was designed for smooth and bottleneck-free operation, but also with games in mind. For example, there are 6 levels of priority when reading from the SSD. Priority is very important. You can imagine the player heading into some new location in the world and the game requesting a few gigabytes of textures. And while those textures are being loaded, an enemy is shot and has to speak a few dying words. Having multiple priority levels lets the audio for those dying words get loaded immediately. On one side, that flash controller connects to the actual flash dies that supply the storage. To reach our bandwidth target of 5 gigabytes a second, we ended up with a 12-channel interface. 8 channels wouldn't be enough. The resulting bandwidth we achieved is actually 5.5 gigabytes a second. With a 12-channel interface, the most natural size that emerges for an SSD is 825 gigabytes. The key question for us was, is that enough? I mean, it's tempting to add more, but flash certainly doesn't come cheap, and we have a responsibility to our gaming audience to be cost-effective with regards to what we put in the console. Ultimately, we resolved this question by looking at the play patterns of a broad range of gamers. We examined the specific games that they were playing over the course of a weekend or a week or a month, and whether that set of games would fit properly on the SSD. We were able to establish that the friction caused by reinstalls or re-downloads would be quite low, and so we locked in on that 825 gigabyte size, while also preparing multiple strategies so that those who want more storage can add it. I'll go through the details in a moment. Back to the flash controller. On the other side, it connects to our main custom chip via 4 lanes of Gen 4 PCIe. And inside the main custom chip is a pretty hefty unit dedicated to I/O. Before we talk about what that does, let's talk compression for a moment. PlayStation 4 used zlib as its compression format. We decided to use it again on PlayStation 5, but on my 2017 tour of developers, I learned about a new format called Kraken from Rad Game Tools. It's like zlib's smarter cousin. Simple, similar types of algorithms, but about 10% better compression, which is pretty big. That means 10% more game on the UHD Blu-ray disc or on the SSD. Kraken had only been out for a year, but it was already becoming a de facto industry standard. Half of the teams I talked to were either using it or getting ready to evaluate it. So we hustled and built a custom decompressor into the I/O unit, one capable of handling over 5 gigabytes of Kraken format input data a second. After decompression, that typically becomes 8 or 9 gigabytes, but the unit itself is capable of outputting as much as 22 gigabytes a second if the data happens to compress particularly well. By the way, in terms of performance, that custom decompressor equates to 9 of our Zen 2 cores. That's what it would take to decompress the Kraken stream with a conventional CPU. There's a lot more in the custom I/O unit, including a dedicated DMA controller. The game can direct exactly where it wants to send the data coming off of the SSD. This equates to another Zen 2 core or 2 in terms of its copy performance. Its primary purpose is to remove check-in as a bottleneck. There's 2 dedicated I/O coprocessors and a large RAM pool. These aren't Zen 2 cores. They're there principally to direct the variety of custom hardware around them. One of the coprocessors is dedicated to SSD I/O. This lets us bypass traditional file I/O and its bottlenecks when reading from the SSD. The other is responsible for memory mapping, which I know doesn't sound like anything related to the SSD, but a lot of developers map and remap memory as part of file I/O, and this too can become a bottleneck. There are coherency engines to assist the coprocessors. Coherency comes up a lot in places. Probably the biggest coherency issue is stale data in the GPU caches. Flushing all of the GPU caches whenever the SSD is read is an unattractive option. It could really hurt the GPU performance. So we've implemented a gentler way of doing things, where the coherency engines inform the GPU of the overwritten address ranges and custom scrub
dólares,
servers
eu
and
acho.
several dozen GPU
Eles
caches
vão
do
conseguir lançar por esse
pinpoint
preço que foi o
evictions of
PlayStation
just
4,
those
ou
address
no máximo
ranges. The
499.
best thing is, as a
Como você
game
falou aí
developer,
mesmo.
when you read from the SSD, you don't need to know any of this. You don't even need to know that your data is compressed. You just indicate what data you'd like to read from your original uncompressed file and where you'd like to put it, and the whole process of loading it happens invisibly to you and at very high speed. Back to the dream. Thanks to all of that surrounding hardware, our 5.5 gigabytes a second really should translate into something like 100 times faster
É o
I/O
mesmo
than
do Xbox
PS4,
Series X.
and allow the
Quem
dream
puder
of no
conferir para
load
mim
screens
aí,
and
fala se é o
super fast
mesmo.
streaming to become a reality. Having said
No
that,
Brasil vai meter a faca.
expandability of our
Impostos, né,
SSD is
cara?
going to be quite important.
Impostos em
Flash is
jogos e
costly,
produtos
and you may
eletrônicos são
very
muito
well
altos
want to
aqui
add storage
também,
to
para
whatever
variar,
we
né?
put in the console. Now,
A
the
velocidade é
kind of
5.5
storage you
gigabytes,
need
galera. Ó,
depends
tá
on how you're
começando a
going to use
mostrar
it. If you
aos
have an
poucos
extensive PlayStation 4 library and you'd like to take advantage of backwards compatibility to play those games on
especificações.
PlayStation 5, then a
PlayStation
large
5, ó,
external hard drive
100
is
megabytes
ideal.
por segundo.
You can leave your games on the hard
Velocidade,
drive
né?
and play them directly from
Externa.
there,
Ah, não.
thus
É
saving
a
the
comparação.
pricier
Olha só a
SSD storage
diferença,
for your
gente.
PlayStation 5 titles, or you can copy
Nossa,
your
cara,
active
100
PlayStation
megabytes
4
por
titles to the
segundo.
SSD. If your
Cartão
purpose in adding more storage is to play
HD externo,
PlayStation
né?
5 titles, though,
O SSD
ideally
lá,
you
ó,
would add to
5.5
your
gigabytes por
SSD
segundo.
storage. We will be supporting certain M2 SSDs.
Com
These
certeza,
are
Valdomiro.
internal drives that you can get on the open
Estamos no
market
Brasil,
and
cara, que tudo é
install
caro,
in a bay
infelizmente.
in the PlayStation 5. As for which
O
ones we
meu eu vou
support
garantir até
and when, I'll get
2022.
to
Até
that in a
dezembro eu
moment.
pego o meu.
They connect through the custom I/O unit, just like our SSD does.
Entendeu?
So they can take full advantage of the decompression, I/O coprocessors, and all the other features I was talking about. Here's the catch, though. That commercial drive has to be at least as fast as ours. Games that rely on the speed of our SSD need to work flawlessly with any M2 drive. When I gave the Wired
Jogos
interview
rodarão
last year,
mais
I said that the PlayStation 5
fluidos, né,
SSD was
nessa nova
faster than anything
proposta
available
de
on PC.
SSD, blá blá blá.
At the time, commercial M2 drives used PCIe 3.0,
Aí, ó,
and
é
4 lanes
Set
of
Trace, é o
that cap out at
PCU que
3.5
eles falaram,
gigabytes
né?
a second.
Esse
In other
PCU,
words,
uma
no
coisa
PCIe
3.0.
3.0 drive can hit the required spec. M2 drives with PCIe 4.0 are now out in the market.
Verdade,
We're getting
Alex.
samples
Galera, quem
and
puder
seeing
conferir os
4
as
or 5
especificações do
gigabytes a
Xbox
second
Series X,
from
mandar para mim
By year's
aqui,
end, I expect
para
there will
ver
be
se
drives
tá
that
batendo,
saturate
porque tá mostrando
4.0 and
aqui, ó,
support 7 gigabytes a second. Having said that,
as
we are
especificações
comparing
já do
apples and
SSD, por
oranges, though,
exemplo,
because
aqui da
that commercial
Sony,
M2
do
drive will
PlayStation
have its
5.
own architecture, its own flash controller,
A
and so
gente
on.
compara aqui.
For example, the NVMe specification lays out a priority scheme for requests that the M2 drives can use. And that scheme
Como
is
você é
pretty
moderador,
nice,
Alex, o
but it
Miguel, o
only has
Valdomiro
2
podem
true priority levels.
mandar link
Our
aqui de
drive
boa.
supports 6. We can hook up a drive with only 2 priority levels, definitely, but our custom I/O unit has to arbitrate the extra priorities rather than the M2 drive's flash controller.
Mas
And
aqui
so
vai
the
ser mais
M2 drive
barato
needs a
importar de
little
lá
extra
mesmo que
speed to
comprar no
take care of
mercado da
issues
vida.
arising from the different
Pois
approaches.
é, a gente vai ter que comprar
That
no mercado
commercial drive
cinza, né?
also needs to physically fit
Mas
inside of the bay we created in
mercado
PlayStation
cinza,
5
deixa eu
for
baixar
M2
pouquinho, galera,
drives.
acho que deve...
Unlike internal hard drives, there's unfortunately no standard
melhor
for
aí,
the
né?
height of an M2 drive.
Mercado
And
cinza,
some
vai ser
M2
vai ser
drives
mais
have
barato.
giant heat sinks. In fact, some of them even have their own fans. Right now, we're getting M2 drive samples and benchmarking them in various ways. When games hit beta as they get ready for the PlayStation 5 launch at year-end, we'll also be doing some compatibility testing to make sure that the architecture of particular M2 drives isn't too foreign for the games to handle. Once we've done that compatibility testing, we should be able to start letting you know which drives will physically fit.
Também não tem problema não, cara. Não tem nenhum problema com isso. PlayStation 4 comprei
It
mercado
would be
cinza.
great if that happened by
Eu não tenho
launch, but
problema
it's
com isso
likely
não,
to be
cara.
a bit past it. So
Bem, fica
please
mais
hold
barato,
off
bem mais
on
em
getting
conta.
that M2 drive
Não é que fica
until you hear
barato,
from
fica
us.
mais...
Okay, back
menos
to our
caro.
principles.
É melhor
Balancing
coisa assim, gente.
evolution and revolution
O termo
is the
certo é
second of them.
menos
This
caro.
was definitely a recurring
Importar não
theme
vai
with
dar
the
por causa de chegar
GPU.
no Brasil eles aumentam mais coisas
We
para pagar.
need new GPU features and
60% sobre o
capabilities.
valor que você
If we only
pagou
have more
convertendo por
performance, it's
real.
not really a new generation
No
of
mínimo.
console. Of course,
Mas o
many of these capabilities result
ICMS,
in more performance.
dá
That's
não, compensa não.
part of
Comprar
why a
aqui pelo
PlayStation
mercado
5
cinza mesmo.
teraflop is more powerful than a PlayStation 4 teraflop.
Camelódromo da
But
vida,
we
sabe?
aren't just looking for the performance. We also need the
Em São
ability
Paulo,
to do
na Santa
something with the
Efigênia, por exemplo, aqui em
GPU that
Goiânia,
could
compra um
not have
camelódromo
been
de
done
Campinas aqui.
before. And we need higher performance
Infelizmente,
per watt.
Alex.
Every time we double the performance
Evolução,
of some
novas
GPU
features,
component,
né?
we
Novos...
don't want to find out we've doubled the power consumed and the heat produced.
acessórios,
But at
né?
the same time, we have to
Alta
make sure the
eficiência.
GPU can run PS4 games, and we have to ensure that the architecture is easy for the developers to adopt. Now, backwards compatibility was handled masterfully by AMD. They treated it as a key need throughout the design process. As our solution to adding new
Quero
features
ver
without blindsiding
retrocompatibilidade. Vamos ver
developers,
se vocês
we
falam,
made sure
falam
that if
sobre
there
isso, né?
were new significant features, it would be optional to
Tomara.
use them. The GPU supports ray tracing, but you don't have to use ray tracing to make your game.
Ray
The
tracing,
GPU
é.
supports
Talvez agora eu
primitive
comece a
shaders, but you
falar
can
de,
release your
vou
first
falar de
game
Ray
on
tracing
PlayStation
agora.
5 without making any use of them. Before I get into the capabilities of
tá
the
anotando isso aí,
GPU, I'd like
cara.
to make clear two
Deixa eu
points
anotar
that
isso
can be
aqui,
quite
peraí.
confusing. First, we have a custom AMD GPU based on their
SSD,
RDNA2 technology. What does that mean?
5.5 GB por
AMD is
segundo.
continuously improving and revising their tech. For
PCU é
RDNA2,
quanto
their
lá?
goals were, roughly speaking,
É
to reduce power consumption by
3.0?
re-architecting the GPU to
Não
put data
lembro.
close to where it's needed, to optimize the GPU for performance, and to add a new, more advanced feature set. But that feature set is malleable,
Tô anotando
which is to
algumas
say
coisas
that we
aqui.
have our own
Já
needs for
falaram aí.
PlayStation, and that can factor
Fazer
into what the
resumão.
AMD roadmap becomes. So
Depois eu acho que eu faço
collaboration is
vídeo
born.
gravado,
If we
resumo.
bring concepts to AMD that are felt to be widely useful, then they can be adopted
na
into
internet também, os
RDNA2 and
resumão
used
e vou
broadly, including in PC
elaborar o
GPUs.
meu.
If the
Oh.
ideas are sufficiently specific to what we're trying to accomplish, like the GPU cache scrubbers I was talking about, then they end up being just for us. If you see a
Cara,
similar
Valdomiro, vai
discrete
sim. Falei pra minha
GPU
esposa, já dei um
available
toque
as
pra ela lá.
a
Depois
PC
disso aqui
card
eu
at
vou,
roughly the
vou
same
fazer
time
minha
as we
conta da
release our
Nova
console,
Zelândia, né?
that means our
E
collaboration with
vou botar
AMD
pra baixar, como
succeeded.
minha internet é 100 MB, acho
Introducing
que
technology
7
useful
GB, parece
in
que é
both worlds. It doesn't mean that we as
DK
Sony
falou que é
simply
7 GB.
incorporated the PC part into our console.
Não, pela
This
Nova Zelândia,
continuous
Alex. Tem como
improvement in
baixar
AMD
hoje.
technology means it's
Oh.
dangerous to rely on teraflops as an absolute indicator of
É
performance.
DNA
And
2, né?
CU
É
count should be
CU, quero
avoided as
PlayStation
well.
4,
In the
beleza.
case of CPUs, we all understand this. The PlayStation 4 and
É,
PlayStation 5 each have 8
7 gigas e
CPUs,
meio,
but
mais
we
ou menos.
never think that meant the capabilities
Pela
and
minha
performance
internet
are
aqui,
equal.
dá pra baixar em
It's
uma
the
hora,
same
mais
for
ou
CUs.
menos.
For one thing, they've been getting much larger over time. Adding new
No
features
máximo.
means
Acho que uma
adding
hora eu
lots of
baixei, talvez
transistors.
até menos.
In fact,
Não, meia hora
the
eu consigo
transistor
baixar.
count for a PlayStation
8
5
GB, né?
CU
Acho que
is
meia hora
62% larger
eu
than the
consigo baixar
transistor
aqui.
count for a
Se eu
PlayStation
botar
4
ainda
CU.
no modo repouso, é mais
Second,
rápido
the
ainda.
PlayStation 5 GPU is
Eu
backwards
chuto
compatible
meia
with
hora, porque
PlayStation
teve
4.
jogo aqui que
What
eu
does that
baixei
mean?
com
One way
16
you can
GB,
achieve
eu
backwards
coloquei na
compatibility is to put the
modo de repouso,
previous
acho que foi uma
console's
hora que
chipset
deu
in the
pra
new
baixar,
console,
então eu
like
vou
we did
colocar
with
uma
some
hora.
PlayStation
É,
3s.
meia hora.
But that's, of course, extremely expensive.
Eu
A better
vou...
way is to incorporate any differences in the previous console's logic into the new console's custom chips, meaning that even as the technology evolves, the logic and feature set that PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro titles rely on is still available in backwards
Tá falando backwards
compatibility modes. One
compatibility.
advantage of this strategy is that once backwards compatibility is in the console, it's in. It's not as if a cost down will remove backwards compatibility
Tá
like it
falando
did on
da...
PlayStation 3. Achieving this unification of
Tá falando
functionality
da
took years of efforts by
retrocompatibilidade, né?
AMD, as any
Tá começando a falar
roadmap
disso, ó.
advancement creates a potential divergence in logic. Running PS4 and PS4 titles at boosted frequencies has also added complexity. The boost is truly massive this time around, and some game code just can't handle it.
Vamos ver se vai
Testing has to be
revelar que
done on
é
a
total
title-by-title basis.
retrocompatibilidade. Né?
Results are excellent, though. We recently took a
Baixar
look at the top
Alex.
100
Se for
PlayStation
no
4 titles
Xbox
as
One, é
ranked
só
by
mudar a
playtime,
região.
and we're expecting almost all of them to be playable at launch on PlayStation 5.
Beleza, Valdomiro, como
With
o DK
regards to
falou
new
mesmo.
features, as I said, our strategy was to try to break new ground, but at the same
Geometria
time not to
do
require use of the new
do
GPU
motor
capabilities.
de geometria do
For more
motor
than a decade,
gráfico, né,
GPUs have imposed a
do
restriction on game engines.
PlayStation 5
Software
que você
handles
fala, né?
vertex processing, but for
Só
the
não
most
rasga
part,
minha roupa pra não
dedicated
ser
hardware is
coisa.
responsible for
Tomara,
the
né? Tá
triangles
falando
and
da
other geometry
retrocompatibilidade
that the
aqui, ó.
vertices form.
Já, você viu
That
que mostrou o
means it's
PlayStation
not
2 e o
possible
3,
to
né?
do even basic optimizations,
Então, e o 4?
such as aborting
Ali já
processing of the
mostrou, então,
vertex
se
if all
for,
geometry that
já dá
uses
pra
it
ter uma
is
noção, ó.
off-screen.
Eles mostraram a arquitetura do PlayStation
PlayStation
2,
5
3
has
e
a
4 ali,
new
ó.
unit called the
Será
geometry
que vai
engine,
ser
which
só
brings
dos 3 ou
handling of
tem mais, hein?
triangles and
Vamos ver,
other
né?
primitives under
Vocês vão
full
falar aí no
programmatic
final.
control.
Ou
As a
daqui a
game
pouco, né?
developer, you're free to ignore its existence and use
Ah,
the
cara, eu
PlayStation
vou
5
gritar aqui
GPU
de
as if it were
felicidade,
no
viu?
more capable than the PS4 GPU,
Ai,
or
ai.
you can use
Vamos
this
lá.
new intelligence in various ways.
É, não rasga a
Simple
roupa não,
usage could be
pra dormir
performance
na rua não. Se
optimization,
for em
such as
casa, pode.
removing backfaced or off-screen vertices and triangles.
Deixa eu ver aqui, gente.
More complex usage involves
Depois
something
que
called
terminar aqui, eu vou
primitive
baixar
shaders, which allow the
o
game to synthesize
Valdomiro.
geometry
Vou
on
fazer
the
live
fly
hoje,
as it's being
à
rendered.
noite, do
It's a
Resident Evil
brand new
3.
capability. Using primitive shaders on PlayStation 5 will allow for a broad variety of techniques, including smoothly varying level of detail, addition of procedural detail to close-up objects, and
Aí, Alex,
improvements
vai
to particle
traduzindo aqui,
effects
isso é
and
muito
other
melhor
visual
que eu no
special
inglês,
effects.
cara. No inglês é meio,
Another major new feature of our custom
bem básico
RDNA
mesmo.
2-based
Mas traduz
GPU
aqui
is ray
para nós.
tracing, using the same strategy as AMD's upcoming PC GPUs. The CUs
Vai
contain
colocando aí, ó,
a new
que você,
specialized
o
unit called the
resumo aí do que
intersection
ele tá
engine,
falando.
which can calculate the
Mas
intersection
não
of
faz muito
rays
tarde
with
não, tem que
boxes
acordar
and
cedo.
triangles.
Ô, beleza,
To
mano,
use
que
the
eu tô
intersection
enrolei,
engine,
cara. É porque eu
first
cheguei
you
tarde
build
em
what is
casa, eu
called
tinha que
an
cumprir minhas
acceleration
horas da
structure.
Animo, sabe?
It's
Aí
data
eu
in
tive que fazer
RAM that
depois da
contains
Animo.
all of your geometry.
Não, hoje eu
There's a
vou
specific set of formats you
começar
can
no
use.
horário
They're
normal, que é a partir das
variations
8,
on
né?
the same BVH concept.
Hoje eu
Then, in your
começo no horário
shader program,
normal,
you use a
beleza?
new instruction that asks the intersection engine to check a ray against the BVH.
Foi?
While the intersection engine is processing the requested ray triangle or ray box
Minha esposa
intersections,
ali.
the shaders are free to do other work. Having said that, the ray tracing instruction is
Cara,
pretty memory intensive, so
não
it's
dá,
a
mas é
good
porque eu
mix
quero
with
acompanhar o
logic
vídeo. Eu tô
heavy
aqui no
code.
notebook, entendeu? A sala tá
There's
lá,
of course no
lá do outro
need
lado,
to
no
use
outro
ray
cômodo.
tracing. PS4 graphics engines will run just
Ó,
fine on
áudio,
PlayStation 5. But
iluminação
it presents
global,
an opportunity
sombras,
for those interested.
reflexos,
I'm
full
thinking
ray
it'll take
tracing.
less than 1,000,000 rays a second
Esse
to
aqui é o
have a
uso dele
big
nos
impact on
jogos, ó.
audio. That should be enough for audio occlusion and some reverb
Edição
calculations.
gráfica mais
With a
potente,
bit
mais
more of the
absoluta.
GPU invested in ray tracing, it should be
Beleza,
possible
meu
to do
querido.
some very nice global illumination. Having said that, adding ray-traced shadows and reflections to a traditional graphics engine could easily take hundreds of millions of rays a second, and full ray tracing could take billions. How far can we go? I'm starting to get quite bullish. I've already seen a PlayStation 5 title that's successfully using ray tracing-based reflections in complex animated scenes with only modest
Cenas
costs.
de animações
Another set of
complexas,
issues for the
modesto,
GPU involves
custo, né?
size and
Custo
frequency.
moderado,
How
custo
big do we
modesto.
make the GPU, and what frequency do we run it at? This is a balancing act. The chip has a cost, and there's a cost for whatever we use to supply that chip with power.
Depois que terminar aqui,
In
eu
general, I
vou
like
botar pra
running
baixar,
the
viu?
GPU at higher frequency. Let
Resident
me show
Evil
you why.
3. Pedi
Here's
baixo, ainda
two
tá cedo, né?
possible configurations for a GPU roughly of the
Dependendo do
level
caso,
of the
galera, como eu tô
PlayStation 4
tranquilo
Pro.
em casa,
This is a
tô de
thought
quarentena,
experiment. Don't
né?
take these configurations too
Tô em
seriously.
casa aqui,
If you just
porque eu não tô trabalhando
calculate
esses dias,
teraflops,
né?
you
Por
get the
conta
same
do
number. But actually, the
Calunga,
performance
né?
is
Vírus,
noticeably
ser vírus.
different because teraflops is
Eu
defined as the
vou...
computational capability of the vector ALU.
Talvez
That's
eu
just
faça uma
one
live
part
até à
of the
tarde,
GPU.
e
There are
outra
a
à
lot
noite.
of other units. And those other units all run
Entendeu?
faster when the GPU
Acho que eu vou fazer
frequency is
isso,
higher.
duas lives nesse
At
período.
33% higher frequency, rasterization goes
É,
33% faster.
das instruções como
Processing
o
the
PlayStation
command
5 vai se
buffer
comportar. Isso
goes
aí, mano.
that much faster. The L2 and other caches have that much higher bandwidth, and so on. About the only downside is that system memory is 33% further away in terms of cycles. But the large number of benefits more than counterbalance that. As a friend of mine says, a rising tide lifts all boats. Also, it's easier to fully use 36 CUs in parallel than it is to fully use 48 CUs. When triangles are small, it's much harder to fill all those CUs with useful work. So there's a lot to be said for faster, assuming you can handle the resulting power and heat issues, which frankly, we haven't always done the best job at. Part of the reason for that is, historically, our process for setting CPU and GPU frequencies has relied on some heavy-duty guesswork with regards to how much electrical power games will consume and how much heat will be produced as a result inside of the console. Power consumption varies a lot from game to game. When I play God of War on my PS4 Pro, I know the power consumption is high just by the fan noise. But power isn't simply about engine quality. It's about the minutia of what's being displayed and how. It's counterintuitive, but processing dense geometry typically consumes less power than processing simple geometry, which is, I suspect, why Horizon's map screen, with its low triangle count, makes my PS4 Pro heat up so much. Our process on previous consoles has been to try to guess what the maximum power consumption during the entire console lifetime might be, which is to say, the worst case scene in the worst case game, and prepare a cooling solution that we think will be quiet at that power level. If we get it right, fan noise is minimal. If we get it wrong, the console will be quite loud for the higher power games, and there's even a chance that it might overheat and shut down if we misestimate power too badly. PlayStation 5 is especially challenging because the CPU supports 256-bit native instructions that consume a lot of power. These are great here and there, but presumably only minimally used. Or are they? If we plan for major 256-bit instruction usage, we need to set the CPU clock substantially lower or noticeably increase the size of the power supply and fan. So, after much discussion, we decided to go with a very different direction on PlayStation 5. We built a GPU with 36 CUs. Mind you, RDNA 2 CUs are large. Each has 62% more transistors than the CUs we were using on PlayStation 4. So if we compare transistor counts, 36 RDNA 2 CUs equates to roughly 58 PlayStation 4 CUs. It is a fairly sizable GPU. Then we went with a variable frequency strategy for PlayStation 5, which is to say we continuously run the GPU and CPU in boost mode. We supply a generous amount of electrical power and then increase the frequency of GPU and CPU until they reach the capabilities of the system's cooling solution. It's a completely different paradigm. Rather than running at constant frequency and letting power vary based on the workload, we run at essentially constant power and let the frequency vary based on the workload. We then tackled the engineering challenge of a cost-effective and high-performance cooling solution designed for that specific power level. In some ways, it becomes a simpler problem because there are no more unknowns. There's no need to guess what power consumption the worst-case game might have. As for the details of the cooling solution, we're saving them for our teardown. I think you'll be quite happy with what the engineering team came up with. So, how fast can we run the GPU and CPU with this strategy? The simplest approach would be to look at the actual temperature of the silicon die and throttle the frequency on that basis. But that won't work. It fails to create a consistent PlayStation 5 experience. It wouldn't do to run a console slower simply because it was in a hot room. So rather than look at the actual temperature of the silicon die, we look at the activities that the GPU and CPU are performing and set the frequencies on that basis, which makes everything deterministic and repeatable. While we're at it, we also use AMD's Smart Shift technology and send any unused power from the CPU to the GPU so it can squeeze out a few more pixels. The benefits of this strategy are quite large. Running a GPU at 2 gigahertz was looking like an unreachable target with the old fixed frequency strategy. With this new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to cap the GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip logic operates properly. 36 CUs at 2.23 gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops, and we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at or close to that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was causing headaches with the old strategy. But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency. That doesn't mean all games will be running at 2.23 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz. When that worst-case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not too much lower. To reduce power by 10%, it only takes a couple of percent reduction in frequency, so I'd expect any downclocking to be pretty minor. All things considered, the change to a variable frequency approach will show significant gains for PlayStation gamers. The final of our 3 principles was about finding new dreams. It's important for us on the hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus on 3D audio. As players, we experience the game through the visuals, through audio, and through the feedback we receive from the controller, such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For example, on PlayStation 4, there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores. Audio typically ends up getting just a fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you consider that the visuals run at 30 or 60 frames a second, but audio processing needs to happen at almost 200 times a second. So,
Vão
it's
resumir
been
todas as
tough going
especificações.
making forward
Será que é
progress on
2.3
audio with
teraflops
PlayStation
mesmo,
4,
gente?
particularly when
Vou anotar
PlayStation
aqui com
3 was
pontos
such a
de
beast when it came to audio.
exclamação, né?
The SPUs in Cell were almost a perfect device
Estou
for
anotando
audio
algumas
rendering.
coisas interessantes
Simple
que eu tô
pipelined
percebendo
algorithms
aqui.
could really take advantage of
Mas,
asynchronous DMA
tomara que não,
and
né?
frequently reached 100% utilization of the floating point unit. There's
Ué, eu tô
unfortunately
acompanhando pelo
nothing
celular
comparable on
aqui,
PlayStation
tá
4.
normal pra mim. Será que na
Probably the most
internet não?
dramatic progress in the PlayStation 4 generation has been with virtual reality. The PSVR hardware has its own audio unit. It supports about 50 pretty decent 3D sound sources. And this provided a hint as to where we could go with audio, as well as some valuable experience. Not to oversimplify, but here were our goals for audio on PlayStation 5. The first goal was
sei,
great
né,
audio for
sei
everyone,
lá, pra mim
not
que eu
just
tô
VR
colocando tá
users
meio
or
atrasado
soundbar
mesmo.
owners or headphone users.
Mas esse
That
negócio de
meant audio had to be
colocar
part
de
of the console.
transmissão.
It couldn't be a peripheral. The second goal was to support hundreds of
eu
sound
acho que
sources.
eu
We
acho
didn't
que é
want
lá, viu?
developers to have
Porque
to pick and choose
engraçado,
what sounds would get 3D
ou então é minha
effects and
live,
which
porque
wouldn't. We wanted
pelo
every
site aqui
sound
tá
in the game
normal.
to have
Deixa eu fazer
dimensionality.
o seguinte,
And
vou
finally, we
recarregar
wanted
aqui.
to really take on the challenges of
Recarregando, galera.
old fixed frequency strategy. With this
Pronto.
new paradigm, we're able to run way over that. In fact, we have to
Pronto,
cap
agora
the
sim.
GPU frequency at 2.23 gigahertz so that we can guarantee that the on-chip
Aí, ó,
logic
2.3
operates properly.
GHz, CPU.
36 CUs
Ih,
at
galera, é
2.23
mesmo, ó.
gigahertz is 10.3 teraflops. And we expect the GPU to spend most of its time at
Eu acho que é isso
or
mesmo,
close to
galera.
that frequency and performance. Similarly, running the CPU at 3 gigahertz was
Acho que é
causing headaches
10.3
with the old
teraflops
strategy.
mesmo aí, ó.
But now we can run it as high as 3.5 gigahertz. In fact, it spends most of its time at that frequency.
A GPU,
That doesn't mean all games will be running at
CPU,
2.23 gigahertz and 3.5
3.5
gigahertz.
gigahertz.
When that worst case game arrives, it will run at a lower clock speed, but not
menos
too much
telefone,
lower.
clock
To
mais
reduce
alto.
power
É.
by 10%, it only takes a couple of
Galera,
percent
eu
reduction
não
in
acho que vai fazer
frequency, so I'd
diferença não.
expect
Você acha
any
que vai?
downclocking
É,
to be
é
pretty
pouco
minor.
menos de,
All things considered, the change to a variable
deixa eu ver
frequency
aqui,
approach will show
10.3,
significant gains for PlayStation gamers.
12.1, né?
The final of our three principles was about finding new dreams. It's important for us on the hardware team to find new ways to expand or deepen gaming, and that's what led us to a focus on 3D audio. As players, we experience the game through the visuals, through audio, and through the feedback we receive from the controller, such as rumble or haptics. Personally, I feel a game is just dead without audio. Visuals are, of course, important, but the impact of audio is huge as well. At the same time, the audio team on a game project has to do a lot with a little. For
1.7
example, on
teraflops a
PlayStation
mais,
4,
né?
there's fierce competition for the Jaguar CPU cores.
do Xbox.
Audio typically ends up
que
getting
vocês
just a
acham?
fraction of a core. That's not much of a computational resource, particularly when you
O
consider
clock
that
é
the
mais
visuals
alto, né?
run
Como o
at 30 or
Valdomiro
60
falou.
frames a second, but
Menos
audio
teraflops,
processing needs to
clock mais
happen
alto.
at
Não
almost
sei, né?
200
Talvez
times
compense
a
com
second.
clock aí, ó.
So, it's been tough going making forward progress on audio
Tem
with
que
PlayStation
custar mais
4,
barato de qualquer
particularly
jeito.
when
Porque é mais
PlayStation
fraco.
3 was such a
Quase
beast when it came to
vai
audio.
ter que ser bem
The
mais forte,
SPUs
acho,
in
para
Cell
acabar
were
com o Xbox
almost
One.
a perfect device for audio rendering.
É.
Simple pipelined
A
algorithms
GPU,
could
né?
really take advantage of asynchronous DMA and frequently reached 100%
Mas se vocês for
utilization
ver
of the floating point
historicamente, o
unit.
Xbox,
There's
o
unfortunately
último
nothing
Xbox
comparable
One
on
X,
PlayStation
ele
4.
é 2 teraflops também
Probably the
mais
most dramatic
potente que o
progress in
PlayStation
the
4 Pro,
PlayStation
mas
4
você vai ver os
generation
jogos,
has
né?
been with virtual
Tem
reality.
muitos jogos multiplataforma que rodam
PSVR
melhor no
hardware
PlayStation
has its
4
own
Pro.
audio
Isso aí
unit.
já foi
It
falado
supports
na
about 50
internet,
pretty decent
gente que eu
3D
conheço já
sound sources.
falou.
And this
E
provided
os
a
exclusivos nem
hint
se
as to
fala,
where we
né?
could
Da
go with
Sony é muito
audio,
melhor.
as well as some
Maioria,
valuable
né?
experience.
Então,
Not to oversimplify, but
teraflop
here
não é
were our
tudo não,
goals
gente.
for audio on
Vai
PlayStation
ter
5.
os fanáticos aí
The
falando de
first goal
teraflop.
was
Né?
great audio for everyone, not just VR users or soundbar owners or headphone
É
users.
2.1 teraflops,
That meant
então
audio
é
had to be part of the console. It couldn't
1.8
be a
teraflops a
peripheral.
menos
The second goal was to support hundreds of sound sources.
que
We
o
didn't want
Xbox
developers
One
to have to
X,
pick and choose
Xbox
what
Series X.
sounds would get 3D effects and which wouldn't. We wanted every sound in the game to have dimensionality. And finally, we wanted to really take on the challenges of presence and locality. Now, when we say
ver o que
presence,
o povo
we
tá
mean
falando
the
aqui
feeling
nesse-
that you're actually there. You've entered the matrix. It's not, of course, something we thought we could perfectly achieve, but the idea was that if we stopped using just a rain sound and instead used lots of 3D audio sources for raindrops hitting the ground at all sorts of locations around you, then at some point your brain would take a leap and you'd begin to have this feeling of real presence inside the virtual world of the game. This has the capacity to affect your appreciation of the game, just like
Muita
music
gente,
in a
tem
game
umas pessoas
does.
aqui na live
The
original
concept of
falando.
locality is simpler. It's just your sense of where the audio is coming from, to the right of you, behind you, above you. This can immerse you further in the game, and it can also directly enhance the gameplay.
Tem gente falando que
To
vai
use
custar $100
Dead
a
Space
menos
as an
que o
example, I
PlayStation,
know,
que
old
o
school.
Xbox Series X.
You're fighting
Aqui,
enemies in fairly
aqui
dark, spooky
na live deles
locations.
aqui, ó, original.
Back in
aqui,
the
que eu tô
day,
vendo
if you played the
pelo
game
site do
using the TV
PlayStation.
speakers, you could tell
Muita
that
gente
there was
falando
one last
que
enemy
vai
growling and
ser
hunting you down,
ruim, né?
but it was
Menos será
difficult to tell
Fox, blá,
quite
blá,
where that
blá.
enemy was.
Isso não
With
quer dizer muita
headphones,
coisa,
you could
não.
tell that the enemy was somewhere on the right, which let you deduce, if you couldn't see it, that it must be somewhere behind and to your right. But with 3D audio with good locality, the idea is you know the enemy is precisely there, and you turn and you take it out. So, how do we know where a sound is coming from in the first place? Well, all those bumps and folds
Deixa eu
in the
botar de
ear have
novo
a
aqui em
meaning,
inglês,
evolutionarily speaking.
Pra pelo menos
Based on
me
what
ajudar
direction the
a-
sound is coming from, sound waves bounce around inside the ear, there's some constructive and destructive interference, and the result is a change in volume.
É,
The
galera.
phase of the sound also
Custar 100
shifts,
menos,
depending on
$100
what
a menos, a
path the
som vai
sound wave
arrebentar.
took to reach the ear canal. These volume changes
Os
and
caixistas têm que
phase
falar,
shifts
não.
are different
Tem
for
que
each
ver na hora de
direction and
jogar,
also vary
ter jogos.
depending on the frequency of the sound.
O
Head
Xbox
size and
Series
head
X,
shape
o Xbox
also
One X
impact
não é o
the
mais
sound in a
poderoso, se
similar
vendeu
fashion.
menos da metade que
The
a Sony
way that
vendeu.
the sound changes, based on
Até a
direction and
Nintendo vendeu
frequency,
mais
can
que
be
o
encoded in a
Xbox One
table
X.
called the Head-Related Transfer Function, or HRTF. Here's part of one. The
Existe
vertical
PlayStation
axis is
10.
the frequency.
Daqui
The
uns muitos
horizontal
anos, né?
axis is the direction, front,
Pois
back, left,
é.
right, and the color gives the degree of attenuation of the sound at that frequency. The HRTF
Galera, eu
is
acho
as
que a
unique
live
to
ela
an
deu
individual as a fingerprint is.
uma
In fact,
atrasada para
you're
nós
looking
aqui.
at
Eu vou
mine
deixar
right
de editar, senão a gente perde
Here's how we measure
informações, viu? Aquela
HRTF. We've
travada que
taken
deu.
hundreds of people
Eu
through
tô
this
vendo que
process.
tá uns
We put a microphone
3
in the
minutos
subject's
aqui
left and
atrasado.
right
Deixa,
ear
né?
canals, and then sit the subject down
Sobre
in the
o
middle of an
aquecimento, né?
array of 22 speakers. We then play an audio sweep from each speaker as we rotate the subject. In the course
Massa,
of
viu?
10 or 20 minutes, we're able to sample the HRTF at over 1,000
Já
locations.
registrou, né?
Using an
Vai
HRTF
ter
when
até o
rendering
10,
audio
certeza.
creates unparalleled quality,
O
but it's
aquecimento, né?
computationally expensive. The simplest way to use an HRTF is to process a sound source to make it appear as if it's coming from one of those 1,000 locations we sample. Unfortunately, the processing has to be done in frequency domain rather than time domain, so there's multiple fast Fourier transforms needed for every sound source for every audio tick. That's a lot of multiplies. This computational complexity was the determining factor for our strategy. It meant we had to bite the bullet and design and build a custom hardware unit
Top, hein?
for 3D audio. Collectively, we're referring to the hardware unit and the
áudio.
proprietary algorithms we run on it as
E aí, galera, vocês ficaram
Tempest
decepcionados com
3D
10.3
audio tech.
teraflops?
The meaning of 3D
imaginava
audio
que ia
and
ser menos
technology should be
mesmo,
pretty
mas não
obvious
sei
here.
não, cara.
As for Tempest, I feel it really reflects our goals
O
with
clock é
audio.
maior,
It
a
suggests a
CPU,
certain
né?
intensity of
GPU
experience
é
and also
gráfico, né?
hints at
CPU
your
é
presence
processador.
within it. We're calling the
O
hardware
clock
unit
da
that we
CPU
built
é
the Tempest
3.5,
engine.
a da, se eu não me
It's based
engano,
on
a
AMD's
da
GPU
do
technology.
Xbox é
We modified
2.7,
a
né?
compute unit in such a way as to make it very close to the
É, vai
SPUs
demorar,
of
né? Com
PlayStation 3.
certeza.
Remember when
A
I said that they were
quanto que é
ideal
do
for
Xbox
audio?
Series X,
So
galera? Quem
the
pode
Tempest
olhar pra
engine
mim? A
has no
CPU
caches, just
do
like an
Xbox
SPU.
e a
All
GPU
data
também.
access is
A
via
GPU
DMA,
no
just like an
PlayStation 5 é
SPU.
2.23
Our target was that it would have
e a
more
CPU é
power
3.5
than a CPU thanks to the
velocidade.
parallelism that
Se eu
a
não me engano,
GPU
do
can
Xbox
achieve,
Series X é
and that it would be more
2.7,
efficient than
alguma
our
coisa assim.
GPU thanks to the SPU-like architecture.
Não sei, né?
The
Vai
goal
dar uma
being
diferença
to
boa
make
aqui da
possible near
CPU, viu?
100% utilization
Isso vai
of
contar
the
muito.
CU's vector
Vai
units.
compensar o fato de
Where we ended
teraflops.
up is a unit with
Teraflops não é tudo
roughly
não,
the same
gente.
SIMD power and bandwidth as all
A
8
gente pode perguntar
Jaguar
para quem
cores in the
conhece que
PlayStation
teraflops não é
4
tudo não. Pode ter
combined.
muito
If we
teraflops.
were
E
to
a
use the same
CPU
algorithms as
funciona a
PSVR,
boa
that's enough
velocidade,
for something like
não resolve tanto assim não,
5,000
gente.
sound sources. But of course, we want to use
Viu?
more complex algorithms, and we don't need
3.1.
anything like that number of sounds.
3.8?
It would have been wonderful if
E a
a simpler
GPU?
strategy, such as
A CPU
using
tem
Dolby
3.8 e a
Atmos
GPU?
peripherals, could have achieved our goals, but we wanted
Por favor.
3D audio for all, not just those with licensed soundbars or the like. Also, we wanted many hundreds of sound sources, not just the 32 that Atmos supports. And finally, we wanted to be able to throw an overwhelming amount of processing power at the problem. And it wasn't clear what any
Tem alguma
peripheral
coisa que é
might
maior
have
que na Sony.
inside of it.
GPU eu vou ver. GPU,
In
acho
fact,
que a GPU que é
with the
maior
Tempest
então.
engine,
Olha lá, por
we've
favor.
even got enough power that we can allocate some to the games, to the extent that games want to make use of convolution reverb and other algorithms that are either computationally expensive or need high bandwidth. But the primary purpose of the Tempest engine remains 3D audio. Now, 3D audio is a major academic research topic. It's safe to say that no one in the world has all of the answers. And the set of algorithms
Se a
that has to
pessoa
be
que eu vi
invented,
falando
tuned, or implemented to realize our vision for 3D audio
acredita que vai ser
is
$100 a menos
immense.
PlayStation 5
For
e o
example,
Xbox Series X,
use of HRTFs
pode
in
saber
games
que
is
a
quite
Sony vai
complex.
arrebentar de vender.
Before,
Lembra
I
que
talked about making
na
the
época do
sound source
PlayStation 4
appear
base,
as
o
if it's
Xbox
coming
One,
from one of those
era
1,000
$100 a
HRTF
menos para a
sample
Sony, né? E
locations.
isso
But
contribuiu
for
para vender bem
high-quality
mais, entendeu?
3D game audio, we have to handle other possibilities.
Então vamos
The
lá, né,
sound
gente?
source might not be at one of the
Tomara.
1,000 HRTF sample locations, so we have to blend the HRTF data from the closest locations that we have sampled. The sound source might be moving, which needs very
Tomara que
special
isso
handling as
aconteça.
that blend keeps changing, and that can cause phase artifacts in the resulting audio. Or the sound source might have a size to it, meaning it should feel as if it's coming from an area rather than a single point. There's also whole categories of approaches to be handled. 3D audio can be implemented using individual processing of 3D sound sources. But alternatively, ambisonics can be used for 3D audio. Ambisonics
3D
speak
áudio,
somewhat
falando
like the
sobre o áudio
spherical
3D, né?
harmonics used in computer graphics. And finally, there's audio devices. The
A
player
GPU eu
might be
acabei de
using
olhar,
headphones
galera.
or TV
A
speakers
GPU
or
lá
have a higher-end
é
surround
a
sound setup with 6 or
1.86,
more speakers,
825.
all
A
of
da
which need
Sony
different
é
approaches.
2.23.
That's
A
a lot of
GPU, que é
variations.
para
It's
processamento
nice to have
gráfico,
the
tem
computational
mais
resources of
velocidade,
the
viu?
Tempest engine, but it's clear that achieving our ultimate goals with 3D
Não é uma
audio is
diferença
going to
muito
be a
grande, não,
multi-year,
mas
step-by-step
tem.
process. Having said that, headphone audio implementation is largely complete at this time. It was a natural place for us to start. With headphones, we control exactly what each ear hears, and therefore the algorithmic development and implementation are more straightforward. For TV speakers and stereo speakers, we're in the process of implementing virtual surround sound. The idea being that if you're sitting in a sweet spot in front of the TV, then the sound can be made to feel as if it's coming from any direction, even
em
behind
GPU
you.
ele é pouquinho maior.
Virtual surround sound has a lot in common with
CPU
3D audio on
3.6, né?
headphones, but it's more
CPU nem tem
complex
muita diferença não,
because
3.5
the
e
left ear can
3.6,
hear
mas
the
a
right
GPU
speaker and
da
vice
Sony é
versa.
pouquinho maior.
We have a basic implementation of virtual surround sound
parte
up and running.
gráfica,
We're now
né?
looking at increasing the size of that
compensa
sweet spot,
esse,
which is to
será
say,
flop, só.
making the area you need to
Vamos
be
ver, né?
in to feel the 3D effect larger. And we're also working to boost the sense of locality. Headphone audio is the current gold standard for 3D audio on PlayStation 5, but we're going to see what we can do to bring virtual surround sound to a
Vamos
similar
ver.
level, after which
Na prática,
we'll start
né,
in
cara?
on setups with more speakers, such as 6-channel surround sound. It's now to
Mas
the
sobre
point
o
where some of the
som 3D,
PlayStation
né?
5 games in development are extensively using these systems. One of the game demos allows you to toggle between conventional
Só eu
PlayStation
acho
4
que essa
style
live vai ser
stereo
longa.
audio and our new
Eu acho que vai
3D
ser,
audio.
viu?
I listened with
Já
just
temos
an
quase uma
ordinary
hora de
pair
live
of
já.
over-the-ear headphones, and wow, I could feel a difference. 3D audio has that dimensional feel to it. Conventional stereo audio feels smashed flat by comparison. The improvement is obvious. So, a big advancement, but have I entered the matrix? Does my brain believe I'm really there, like I was talking about earlier when I explained our target of presence? Well, the answer is no, but you've probably caught on to what's missing here, namely whose HRTF was being used. It wasn't mine, it was
Com
the default
certeza, tem coisa
HRTF.
pra
The
falar
audio
pra
team
caramba.
analyzed the hundreds that they measured and chose the one they felt was the closest fit to the total game playing audience. This shows a piece of the default HRTF on the left and my HRTF on the right. You can see that the general features are much the same, but the
Depois eu
details
vou lá no
are
canal
quite
do,
different. With the default
Detonando
HRTF,
Brick
as I
para ver
said,
se
the 3D
ele,
audio
se ele
sounds
vai
pretty
falar
great.
das
When I
especificações
use
técnicas
my
aí, que ele é da
HRTF,
área,
though,
né?
the audio reaches a higher level
Quem não
of
conhece, o
realism,
canal dele é
which is
excelente.
to say
Não
that
que a
when
mulher
using
dele não sei, vai
headphones
pra encher
and
o
my
saco, né?
HRTF, I occasionally get
Eu
fooled
queria
and
que
even
tivesse
think a
fazendo
sound
live,
is
depois eu
coming
ia
from the
ver,
real world when it's actually coming from the
ia
game.
assistir, mas ele não tá
A
não.
corollary to this is that there are a few people whose HRTFs are sufficiently far from the default HRTF, that's the red dot here, that they can toggle between PS4 style and
Depois eu
PS5 style
fazer,
audio and not sense much
deve
difference.
fazer
I've had a few people describe the PlayStation 5's 3D audio as sounding like
análise
a
técnica.
bit
Por que você
better stereo
decepcionou, Miguel?
audio.
Não é? O negócio nem
Presumably they're the
mostrou
ones
o
at the very
console,
edges of this
não mostrou o jogo
diagram,
rodando,
which
ninguém
means
tá jogando
what
ainda.
HRTF you're using is key.
Só por
I'd
causa que
like
tem menos
everyone to be able to
teraflops, cara.
experience what I'm
Teraflop
experiencing,
quer dizer
but
nada não,
obviously
irmão.
it's not possible to measure
A
the
diferença não é
HRTF
tão
of every
grande assim.
PlayStation user.
Não quer dizer
That
nada não,
means
quer dizer, mas não
HRTF
é tudo não.
selection and synthesis are
Entendeu?
going to be
Vamos
big
ver como é que a
topics going
GPU vai
forward
trabalhar. A
as the
GPU tem um
Tempest
clock um pouquinho
technology
maior que da
matures.
Xbox.
At PlayStation 5
A
launch,
Sony
we'll be
não é
offering
boba
a
não,
choice of
gente.
5 HRTFs. There's a
A Sony não
simple
entra pra
test where
perder
you
não. A
pick the
Sony é
one that gives you
líder
the best
desse
locality.
mercado aí, ó.
That's
Vende
just the
mais que o
first step,
dobro
though.
do
This is an
Xbox.
open-ended research topic. Maybe
Decepciona
you'll be
não.
sending us a photo of your ear,
Muito
and we'll
cedo pra
choose a
decepcionar,
neural
irmão.
network to pick the closest HRTF in our library.
Entendeu?
Maybe you'll be sending us a video of your ears and your head, and we'll make a 3D model of them and synthesize the HRTF.
Tem tempo
Maybe
ainda,
you'll play
lá
an
no final do ano
audio
que vai
game
lançar.
to
Eu vou
tune your
comprar só daqui
HRTF. We'll
2
be
anos,
subtly changing it
e
as you
pouco
play
mais ou
and
menos,
home
quase
in
3
on
anos.
the HRTF that
2
gives you the
anos no mínimo eu
highest
tô
score,
comprando o meu,
meaning
então
that
eu
it
nem tô
matches you
preocupado
the
com isso
best.
não, cara.
This is a journey we'll all be taking together
Decepcionar
over
não
the
é hora
next
de
few years.
decepcionar, não.
Ultimately, we're committing to enabling everyone to experience
A
that
Sony é
next
boba não,
level
cara. A
of
Sony é líder
realism.
desse
Hopefully, I've been able to illustrate a bit
mercado
about
aí.
our design and decision-making process today,
Líder
and why
isolado.
PlayStation
E vai
5 has
continuar.
the
Você
feature set
pode
that it
escrever o que eu
does.
te falando.
Now comes the fun part. We get to see how the development community takes
Ela vai
advantage of
investir
that
em
feature
jogos
set.
exclusivos
I'm
de
hoping for the
qualidade.
completely unexpected. Will it come from audio, ray tracing, the capabilities of the SSD, or something else? I guess we'll find out soon enough. Thank you for your time today.
Acabou. Gente. Acabou, gente. Console que é bom nada. Muita gente achou ruim pra caramba, ó. Xingando aqui, mandando dedinho aí. Olha aí.
Esse é o
Gente, acabou. Acabou, gente. E aí, o que vocês acharam? Não é que eu me decepcionei, eu esperava o console e tudo, mas sabia que não, né? Agora depois eu vou ver o vídeo do Detonando Greek para ver se ele explica melhor esse... Vamos ver se tem alguma coisa aqui, galera, na internet sobre isso. Já tem gente se adiantando aqui. Duvido, né? Acabou. Aí, ó. Quase comandamento SD, com personalidade de 825 GB, promessa de ser até 100 vezes mais rápido que em relação ao HD. 825 GB, mas deve ser 1 tera, né? 125 GB deve ser o que tem disponível. Zen 2 oferece frequência de até... Nanana. Vamos ver aqui, galera. Eu vou comprar quando sair o lançamento, vou esperar quando sair, tem uma ótima ideia como o console está. Pois é, mano. Não dá pra decepcionar não, cara. Muito cedo. Não. Ó. Sony acabou de anunciar. Já lançaram aqui, ó. Os caras já estavam de olho, ó. Videogame mais rápido do mundo, eles estão prometendo, né? Lembrar que tem previsão de chegar no mercado até o final do ano. Teraflop, falou não? Deixa eu ver aqui. 10.28, na verdade é 10.3, sei lá, teraflops, né, que ele falou, né? 10.28, não, 10.3. Visual menor do que o Xbox Series principal, o concorrente chega com 12 teraflops, beleza. Gente, tem muito o que falar não, foi o que a gente viu mesmo. Então SSD de 825 GB, que deve ser o de 1 tera, né? Ou vão lançar de 825 GB, sei lá, né? 100 vezes mais rápido que o HD de 500 GB do PlayStation 4, né? O dobro de mais rápido, então 100 vezes, né? Zen 2 da AMD, oferece frequência de até 3.5 GHz. É, gente, só isso mesmo. Deixa eu ver aqui. Ó, Zen. Isso aqui é na Twitter, ó. 28 teraflop, 36, 16 GB. Vamos ver aqui. É o do meu PlayStation 4, mudou de nome, né? É meu PlayStation. Deixa eu ver aqui. Aí a comparação, ó. Achou que vocês não dá olha o tamanho de jogos PlayStation 4, imagina do 5. Pois é, mano, SSD é o seguinte. O do Xbox é 1 TB, né? Esse aqui também provavelmente é 1 TB, porque 825 GB é custom, tá vendo? Provavelmente é o que é disponível, igualzinho do Xbox, entendeu? Mudou não nesse ponto aqui. SSD é muito caro, não dá para colocar um SSD de 2 TB agora que vai ficar muito caro. E vai ser fácil você expandir isso aqui, vai ser caro, né? Mas você coloca por fora ali mesmo, muito mais fácil. Muito provavelmente, mas... É, gente. Vamos fazer uma comparaçãozinha. Especificações, Xbox Series X. Vamos ver se já tem alguma comparação aqui. Aqui o comparativo, vamos ver aqui. Brasas reveladas. Frequência. Posto em GPU de 10.28 teraflops, 10.3 que mostrou lá, né? 3 unidades de computação, rodando a 52 unidades, né? Tem 36, porque é menos teraflops, né? Na frequência de 2.23, a frequência é maior, tá vendo? Marcas 16 GB também, ó. Empataram, continha apenas 8 GB, 5. Terá 1 terabyte customizado e o preço de 525. Praticamente tem menos mesmo, também customizado. Quando o console dá mais só prometendo a velocidade de armazenamento de dados de 2.4, 4.8, o dispositivo da Sony terá 5.5 e entre 8.9. Tá vendo aqui, ó? Olha aqui, gente, ó. A Sony praticamente tem o dobro. Aqui, ó. Capacidade de armazenamento de dados, tá vendo? 5.5 e entre 8 a 9. Olha a diferença, gente. 2.4 e 4.8 GB de 5.5 a 8.9. A Sony ela perde em teraflops, né? Porque consequentemente em unidades de computação, porque é menos teraflops, né? Ganha em GPU, velocidade de GPU, e mas ganha também em armazenamento, que é praticamente o dobro. Ó, velocidade de armazenamento. Olha lá. Dobro, gente. Tá vendo? Por isso que você vai dar uma equilibrada boa. O dobro do Xbox Series X aqui. 2.4 a 4.8, 5.5 já é maior que a final, ó. A 8 e 9, 8 a 9 GB por segundo, olha a diferença. O dobro. E ó. Dois casos aqui, tá vendo? Ambos terão possibilidade de expansão de memória com slot interno para SSD, ambos permitem Ainda uma expansão externa com HD via USB também, ó, tá vendo? Supostamente para suporte de jogos retrocompatíveis. Aí, ó. Vai ter, né? Ele falou que ele mostrou os 2, 3 e 4 ali, mas vai ter, gente. Aqui, ó, eu já tinha mencionado, né? Terá retrocompatibilidade com o PlayStation 4. Não mencionou se o console também será compatível com as outras gerações do PlayStation. Pode ser que tenha, né? Indica que poderão ficar de fora desse recurso, mas eu acho que não, acho que vai ter sim. Ó, 100 jogos do PlayStation mais jogados no PlayStation 4 já sejam retrocompatíveis no lançamento, hein? Bom demais. Isso mesmo, isso mesmo, Miguel, bem lembrado. O PlayStation 5 já foi revelado lá atrás que teria um carregamento bem mais rápido. O dobro de capacidade de carregamento, de velocidade de carregamento, ou seja, vai carregar bem mais rápido que o Xbox, 2 vezes mais, ou 100 vezes mais, como, né? Que é o dobro, entendeu? 100%. Então, ver aqui comentários. 4K. Tá, sistema de boost para tentar oferecer um desempenho efetivo, independente do ambiente do clima, ou seja, o novo videogame processará as mesmas cargas de trabalho com o mesmo nível de desempenho, alheio a temperaturas e efeitos que isso pode ter sobre um hardware. Neste caso, o boost funciona como uma espécie de gerenciamento de energia previamente definido. Essas cargas, por sua vez, estão vinculadas aos limites técnicos e à refrigeração do videogame. Cerny, o arquiteto, explica que o PlayStation 5 não rodará em frequência constante, permitir que a energia varie com base na carga de trabalho. Ao invés disso, o console processar energia constante, sua frequência poderá variar com base na carga de trabalho. Vale apontar que o monitor interno analisará os picos de processamento de ambas as CPUs e GPU, ajustando-as para que suas frequências correspondam uma à outra. Aqui eu estou na Teremos, né, no site. Evitando assim oscilamentos do desempenho em tempo real. Além disso, o PlayStation 5 usará uma tecnologia intitulada Smart Shift da AMD para que toda a energia não utilizada da CPU seja levada à GPU, espremendo mais alguns picos de processamento sempre que possível. Interessante isso aqui, ó. Cerny ainda admite que a CPU e a GPU darão sempre a 3.5 GHz e 2.23 GHz, respectivamente, que ajudará o console quando o processador atingir o limite de energia de clocks. O arquiteto do PlayStation também revela que o videogame oferece ray tracing acelerado em hardware. Muito bom. Através de seu Intersection Engine. Uma tecnologia baseada nas estratégias das próprias GPUs de PC da AMD. Legal, hein? Mas que a gente já tinha visto, né? Bem melhor, né? Piada, né, Alex? Mas uma coisa eu te falo, gente. O PlayStation 5 com certeza vai ser mais barato que o Xbox Series X, por ele ter menos teraflops, mas a Sony investiu em armazenamento de dados, que é o dobro, a velocidade, né? Investiu na GPU com velocidade maior, então vai carregar mais rápido e provavelmente os gráficos vão ser renderizados mais rapidamente, não sei, né? Não entendo muito desse assunto. Mas a Sony não dá murro em ponto de faca não, gente. Você vai ver. Essa diferença de teraflop vai ser compensado com a GPU maior, com clock maior e com armazenamento, com a velocidade de armazenamento de dados dobro do que o Xbox Series X. Vamos esperar, viu? Não fica decepcionado não, Miguel. Então, ele vai ser mais fraco em teraflops, vai ser mais rápido em carregamento. Justamente, Miguel. Procura depois o vídeo do do Detonando Quick. Tem um vídeo lá, procura no canal dele, digita lá, teraflops, tem muito teraflops, é mais importante, né, do que outras coisas. Ele explica, teraflop não é tudo não, gente. As pessoas focam só em teraflops, em números, mas não é tudo não, viu? Então é isso, gente. Acho que eu vou ficando por aqui mesmo. A live foi só para isso. Foi mais de 1 hora aí, tá bom demais. Vou fazer umas coisas aqui. Vou baixar o Resident Evil 3. A demo, vou fazer a conta aqui no próprio videogame não, no próprio notebook aqui. E vou jogar lá. Beleza, gente? É isso aí, gente. Até mais, viu? Exatamente, Miguel. Não vai ter mais não, cara. Com essa velocidade aqui, ainda mais considerando a velocidade do PlayStation 5, acabou isso. Falou, amigo. Beleza, eu vou ver. Não é certeza, mas eu vou baixar o videogame não. O jogo, Resident Evil 3, a demo pela Nova Zelândia. Se eu conseguir baixar em tempo hábil, se eu não estiver fazendo outra coisa, eu faço uma live à tarde. Concluo, jogo demo agora e à noite eu jogo The Last of Us, que eu tenho que fechar no canal, beleza? À noite é a partir das 8, à tarde eu não sei ainda. Depende do que eu estiver fazendo aqui em casa. Beleza, gente? Depois que eu baixar o Resident Evil 3, eu chamo vocês aí, a gente faz a live aí, beleza, gente? Do Resident Evil 5, 3. 5 não, 3, né? Até mais. Valeu, Miguel. Valeu, Odomir, Alex, Maxley, todo mundo aí. Deixa eu fechar aqui, gente. Até a próxima, galera. Valeu. Ó, quem não deixou o like, deixa o like aí, compartilha a live, por favor, que vai se tornar vídeo no canal, né? Até a próxima aí, galera. Valeu. Até mais tarde. Tchau.